This episode of Inside Golf Podcast is brought to you by Inside Sports Network. We are absolutely cooking over there with our first cut tournament of the week of the year, I should say. Evacuations will not stop us from providing the highest level of information out there and starting to see that flag fly at the top of those leaderboards. Our own Rishi is out here providing a ton of Australian Open content. I had no idea that people played tennis DFS, but that's why we brought him on. He finds these niche markets for DFS and murders them. There is a huge DFS edge with tennis majors, I am told, and those are the types of soft markets that we are going to continue to target. The entire ISN community as well will be rooting extra hard today at the Sony Open for my man Joey, my business partner, my right hand man, and doing all the hard work to make ISN what it is today. He's sitting second in a big GPP with a truly insane lineup. He managed to find the best combination of my core and my player pool, and then sprinkled in his own magic in there with Nick Taylor. And so, knew it would only be a matter of time before we started taking down GPPs, and we will be rooting hard today for Joey, who also just got engaged, by the way. So a huge shout out there. And his fiance, I already know, is a saint for putting up with all of the long nights and phone conversations that it required behind the scenes to start this thing. And none of it would exist without his hard work. So yeah, hop in there. It's become a pretty special place. Our football channel and coverage just on all sports has kind of become just as robust as our golf. And we only charge that one flat rate for all of it. But that's what happens when you get a bunch of sharp people together. It just kind of happened organically, where we started discussing other sports as well. So, it would be wasted talent, and the level of insight in that community from our subscribers and our team has really blown me away. I think it is such a perfect place if you want to just dip your toes in and learn, and also the place now for the best high stakes stuff with Rishi and Kobe. So InsideSportsNetwork.com, give it a shot. As I say, let us prove it to you. And we would love to have you join that community. Okay, before we get into the MX, I just want to address a very important issue to me, which is the California wildfire, and share a big thank you to all of the people that reached out to me to make sure I was safe. We are talking people that I never expected to hear from again, just saying hey, I'm so sorry for what happened to your community and to your mom, and let me know if there's anything I can do. And I can't, that means a lot because it's been a rough couple of days, but again, at the end of the day, what I have had to deal with, and even my mom is very small compared to others in the community. And so nobody knows how to navigate it. I think we're all trying to pick up the pieces, and, part of what Elon is, I kind of like to joke about the, we are the media now, but in this case, a lot of what Elon is saying about people should be posting what is happening is 100% correct. In this case, they should, because I still think people truly do not realize across the country how truly fucked this is. But at the same time, it's tough because I thought about posting the video of when I went to finally check out the remains of my mom's house today and see all the ashes, and, to just say goodbye. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to post this. I feel kind of weird turning this into clicks. There are people that have still had it way worse than I have. So just at the end of the day, I don't know, it's all very shitty. And I think above all, Uh, really just sad to watch a very special place to me, a very special place to many people. I mean, I think it's the best place to live on planet Earth. This is where I want to grow old and raise a family. Uh, the restaurants, the hiking trails, the ocean, kind of that spiritual connection that you develop to a place when you have all of these tremendous memories and it's just so many of your go-to spots that you've built a life at and have been there for you in tough times that really grows into your home. And anyone who has lived anywhere probably understands that and what it would feel like to watch that place burn and be pretty powerless over that. I mean, walking outside my apartment, it is completely dystopian right now. I mean, downtown Santa Monica is a total shell of itself. There's like a few people outside walking, and all of them are wearing like COVID masks because of the smoke. It is totally like COVID, really, where we are right now. And again, no one knows what to do. I've had to evacuate twice, and I'll probably get another Amber Alert again. I don't think anyone has any idea how to handle this. So give people a break. I don't think no one knows how to act in these situations. I've had dozens of people text me solely about Riviera, and not once was I like, yeah, fuck this person. He asked me about Riviera when he should have asked me about my mom's. Like, it's okay. I don't think anyone that is curious about Riviera 2 is an evil person or doesn't understand the tragedy of what else is at stake and has been lost in the fire. I think people are being so critical of each other and so shitty to each other. And natural disasters, you would feel like used to be a time where people would band together. And of course, there's a lot of it. As opposed to divide, particularly along political lines, although there is a lot of merit to some of the political stuff that is play here, although certainly not something I will be talking about on this podcast. But at the end of the day, no one knows what the hell to do in these situations, and everyone is just trying their best. Um, there's no playbook, there's no guidebook for this. The only people that I'm less sympathetic to is like these billion-dollar corporations like the PGA Tour. So that's the only thing that actually bothered me in all of this was when the PGA Tour put out this message to their players being like, we're monitoring the situation. Well, would it monitoring the situation be donating to the community or using your expansive resources to help? And maybe they have. I don't know. I haven't seen any statement from them regarding a cause that they were supporting, but I'm sure they have or will. Um, and even somebody was like, "Yeah, you shouldn't be tweeting about answering questions about Riviera. There are more important things at play." Like, dude, I fucking know, man. I'm living it. That's why I'm telling the PGA Tour to help the community. And if they want to have a tournament at Riviera, there's things they can do. So at the end of the day, just encourage kindness. Everyone in this community is scrambling to pick up the pieces and confused and tense. And just being kind and sharing support always means a lot. And, the only people that can literally get fucked in this situation are those that are saying that only rich people are affected by this. You might be the worst people on the internet. Like, yeah, of course, there's some expensive real estate in Malibu. And sure, some that have had their home burnt down are wealthy. But if you think that those are the only people that got absolutely boned here, you're out of your mind. I mean, a public fucking high school burned down in the middle of a school year. All of the apartment complexes on Palisades Drive, 200,000 people had to evacuate. State Farm is dropping 72,000 property insurance policies. The whole village, where there were small businesses and thousands of workers that lost their place of work, are out of work, are out of a job, and have no insurance. This is going to way surpass the economic impact that Katrina had on this country. 57 billion, my ass. Those numbers are way low. We are still evacuating in Brentwood. So if you think that this is a couple of mansions that burned down in Malibu, like, genuinely, that is the one thing that I just can't believe is even a take right now from some people. So anyway, thank you again for everyone that reached out to me. It truly means a lot. And again, I will post some of the resources and places to donate to in the description to the pod, as obviously it's an issue that I care very, very deeply about. And it's something very, very important to me. So let's move on to the Sony business as usual. Or excuse me, I don't have a ton to say about the Sony. I want to talk mainly about the Amex because there's some golf course changes to get into there, which is pretty underreported. I'm starting to get the sense how much impact those changes will have on the outcome of the tournament. That's certainly for us to break down and dive into. But in terms of the Sony, I don't know. Another one of those Sundays where it could go either way for me. I have some guys adjacent to the mix. Really hard to say what to make of a Russell Henley, who is the guy closest to the top of the odds board, but is also Russell Henley and is also 3 back. It's not like the leaderboard ahead of him is filled with prolific closers by any means. But I'm not exactly looking at this tour. I mean, I have a lot of high leverage top 20s that are going to determine things for me, but kind of meh, to be honest with you. Like, I wasn't super, super pumped about my betting card or my overall performance. A lot of people in the community seem to be doing really well, which is really way more important than how I'm doing. I really didn't. Just one of those weeks where I feel like I didn't get the right combinations of my player pool together. And I played Corey Connors, and that's a big hand up. That's just a big L, that I will always take full accountability for. A 28% or whatever Corey Connors sounds so stupid the second things tee off on Thursday. Although in my head, looking at the numbers, he hadn't missed a cut in 31 starts. And I think that was kind of how I felt with the Henley Connors, I would say, dilemma this week, is that I felt fairly certain that, because my numbers were very, very similar on the two, in terms of you could build almost nearly identical cases for why each player was like, had the highest floor in the field, had the highest likelihood based on course fit to at least be there and put themselves in the mix. And I ended up betting Henley over Connors, not necessarily because I loved Henley that much more than Connors, but because the betting number was so much better. I mean, 22 on Henley compared to 14 to 16 on Connors. That's just a no-brainer. But in DFS, I kind of played both of them and felt, I really feel like one of them is 100% going to be there. And I guess we do have that with Henley, although I would have liked to see a little bit more out of him than 3 strokes back entering the final round. And I felt like one of them was definitely going to disappoint. And if I tried to choose one of the two, I was just absolutely going to choose wrong. And so I felt like you kind of almost had to either play both of them or neither of them. And both my 2 co-hosts on the Wednesday premium show, Kyle and Kobe, were both like, fuck this, I'm playing neither of them. And I ultimately think that was the right move, because when you have 50% Connors, that's going to screw you a lot more than having 50% Connors and then having 50% T7 Russell Henley or whatever it is. So again, A lot of good runners for the community. Me, I don't know. I feel like I got to do a little bit better. I feel like I'm close, but I'm giving myself a B- on the Sony. All right. So we are headed to Palm Springs this week. A lot of my friends there right now, they've evacuated to Palm Springs and it just looks beautiful out there. We are the first stop in the West Coast swing. The event was previously 5 rounds of competition, known for its celebrity pro-am hosted by Bob Hope. In 2012, it changed to a traditional 72-hole format across 3 different courses with a 54-hole cut, not dissimilar to the AT&T Pebble Beach. And it's been hosted at a number of different places in Palm Springs over the years before settling on the stadium course at PGA West, the Nicklaus course, Nicklaus Tournament course, and La Quinta Country Club. So this 3-course rotation has been in existence since 2016. So I would not spend a ton of time deliberating over tournament results from prior to that year. The event has kind of seen a bit of a resurgence in star power in recent years. Although Scotty Scheffler, who had previously committed and played this event last year, will still be watching from the sidelines while he recovers from a hand injury. But you've got Xander, Cantlay, JT, Sung Jae, Sam Burns, Tom Kim, Wyndham Clark will all be making the trip to the desert. None of these players will be making their season debut. And it's worth noting that 8 of the last 9 champions of the American Express had played in either the Sony Open or the Century Tournament of Champions until Nick Dunlap, of course, broke that trend last year, becoming the first amateur to win on the PGA Tour in 33 years. But I would also mention that success at this event is not necessarily success in Hawaii is not necessarily a prerequisite. So only 50% of those 8 winners recorded a top 10 during the first 2 Hawaii events. So kind of similar to our evaluation of the Sony. Be cautious of those making their first start of the year, but not overly critical of early season performance. And last year you had Dunlap, I believe he was as high as 400 to 1. Then you had Rahm the prior year at plus 650, Hudson Swafford at 220 to 1, Siwoo Kim at 60 to 1, Andrew Landry at 200 to 1. And so I took the 3-course average over the last 5 years, and the stadium course played minus 1.98 strokes under par. La Quinta played minus 2.86 strokes under par, almost a full shot difference over the last 5 years. La Quinta has been easier than the stadium course. And the Nicklaus Tournament course kind of splits the difference, minus 2.55, actually closer to the La Quinta end than the stadium end. So I would say, and this will transition us into talking about the changes that occurred to the stadium course this year in terms of their renovation. But I would say for showdown purposes and for the purposes of a lot of the things I'm going to talk about in this breakdown in my model, you want to focus on the stadium course because that's the golf course that we have the most data on. That's the golf course that every player on Sunday is going to play, and they're going to play double their rounds at the stadium course than they are at the other 2 golf courses. And already, if there wasn't even a renovation, and I'll talk about the renovation in a second, I would say that for showdown purposes, personally for me, I would not fuck around with the stadium course. That's enough of a sample size over the last 5 years where we're talking about over half a stroke around, at least 0.6 strokes around, for a field that is largely made up of not a lot of elite talent. That is a really big edge. So I'm not really a huge showdown player, but I can't emphasize this enough. If you are a showdown player, personally for me, I'm open to other strategies, right? If that's the thing that's great about the Discord. Like, I would love to hear other takes on this, but for me personally, I would not screw around with the stadium course whatsoever. And I'll tell you why I feel even stronger about that this year. Um, so basically I was on the second evacuation of the week last night, and thank God for my guy Steve. Um, I promise, as you guys probably know from listening to this podcast for a couple of years, I generally like to think of myself as like as on top of this type of stuff as it gets. This type of stuff is really my specialty and lane. But on Friday night, I was kind of scrambling, and Steve was like, "Hey, have you seen this article that the stadium course is going to feature completely new greens for the 2025 event?" I was like, "Steve, I'm embarrassed to say that I have not. That has not crossed my desk whatsoever. But thanks for alerting me." And I dove into it, and yeah, well, it will likely have maybe a negligible effect on play. I'll dive into what I think is actually going to change. That is why Steve is the best, and that is why we hired Steve. And of course, um, I think this is going to be largely ignored in content. Well, not anymore after we started talking about. But uh, shout out to Steve for finding this article about how the greens and bunkering at the stadium course was actually, I mean, it started to get tore up as soon as the tournament ended last year, and it's going to feature brand new greens and a lot of brand new bunkers. And in terms of the actual changes, Tim Liddy performed them, an architect who worked closely in the 1980s with Pete Dye. And actually, I think he's a good man for the job because he worked pretty hand in hand with Dye in the 80s, seeing what this golf course used to be and what it used to do to PGA Tour players. And I think people now forget because over the last 20 plus years, this has been one of the easier golf courses on the PGA Tour. When this golf course was designed, this was supposed to be the hardest golf course in the world. I mean, this was winning awards as the hardest golf course in the world. And PGA Tour players would not play this event because it was so hard. They hated this event. They would complain, right? And then over time, technology changed. Um, and, if there's ever a better example of how technology has completely transformed the game and it's simply not just a matter of players getting better, I would really look at scoring average over time at this tournament. So I think last year, which I would say was about 5 to 10 years too late, the PGA Tour kind of looked at scoring at the stadium course once again, which I think was 29 under, and said to themselves, wow, we've really lost the plot in terms of this golf course that its entire identity used to be about challenging the players, and now it has become one of the easiest stops on the PGA Tour. How can we restore this golf course's identity, right? How can we get this back to a more fearsome test by players? And what they did, they honestly didn't really lengthen the golf course at all, but they put in new greens. And I think that is going to be an immediate upgrade in lowering the greens in regulation percentage, because this is something that we talked about when Colonial built new greens last year, is that anytime you have brand new greens, it takes many years for the greens to settle. And so brand new greens that haven't had a lot of sand splashed onto them, that haven't had a lot of golf balls hit into them, they're very firm. They're almost going to play like concrete, and that should make sense in theory for people, right? Like it's like when you put down a new surface before you stomp your feet over it, over time, all of those footprints, all of that sand, all of those golf balls are going to cause the grass to settle and soften over time, right? So just immediately right off the bat, the fact that these are new greens, it's going to be harder to hold these greens. Okay. So that's a net positive that I think the golf course is at least a safe bet to play harder. Number two is one of the hardest aspects of the stadium course, and has always been one of the hardest aspects of the stadium course, has been the bunkers. And even before this renovation, the bunkers have played amongst the hardest on the PGA Tour. I mean, you remember that famous I don't know, I think it's 15 or 16, but the giant bunker, I guess it's to the left of the green that feels like the green's a mile up in the air. And if you're in that bunker, you're just totally boned and have to launch the ball super high to even get out of it. So this was a big part of the stadium course's identity back in the 80s is it was like the most heavily bunkered golf course on tour, and it featured some of the hardest and deepest bunkers on tour. Now, again, similar to greens, what happens to bunkers over time is a lot of splash out, a lot of sand built up on the edges, and they sort of lose their shape, they lose their structure, they kind of lose their bottom, right? The bottom almost gets digged out of it, and they lose that kind of concave bottom shape that is what causes balls to roll all the way to the bottom of the bunker and makes bunker shots inherently harder. Now, they're still featuring like some of the easiest sand at these bunkers on planet Earth. Like, in my opinion, we should be featuring far more natural sand on the PGA Tour and golf courses in general. This is like the Fried Egg actually devoted like a whole 15-minute segment to this on one of their recent pods about how the sand that we use in bunkers is eliminating bunkers as hazards because it's become this uniform sand that players have grown so accustomed to, and it is so easy to launch high and generate spin out of that. Often you hear, and you've been hearing this for a decade now, if you've been watching PGA Tour golf, get in the bunker when a bunker is supposed to be a hazard. So I'm somewhat optimistic that because they didn't really make the golf course longer anymore, they didn't really add any more water or anything. There's no real water to add, to be honest with you. There's already a ton of water on this golf course. But I think the firm greens and the new bunkers are going to have an impact on scoring. I do, at least at the stadium course. So what does that mean for us? That means number one, and hopefully this will be a bigger edge for us if no one's talking about this too, but I just think that for showdown purposes, like avoid the stadium course at all costs. It doesn't mean that there's going to be a guy on the stadium course that shoots a better score than a guy on La Quinta or Nicklaus tournament course, of course, but like if you're trying to solve a math equation, it's just not worth it. Number two, and I'll talk about this in what I think is important at this golf course, is one of the things that was interesting to me when I was doing my research on American Express was this is typically thought of as like the number one putting contest on the PGA Tour, right? You had John Rahm talk about piece of shit putting contest, and then ironically, he proceeded to win this golf tournament losing 4 strokes putting. And I know John Rahm's one of the best players in the world, but I don't want to underrate how much of a path that appears to be on this golf course over the years. Like if you actually dive into the numbers, this is far more over the years been a golf tournament that is won with elite approach play than it is one with elite putting. Now, ideally, you want a combination of the two. And over the last 5 years, the strokes breakdown of winners has looked basically something like gaining around 2.5 strokes off the tee, 6 strokes on approach, like barely any around the green, like 0.2 strokes around the green. Although I do think around the green is going to be a little bit more impactful this year, or at least a little bit more challenging given the lower greens and regulation percentage and the brand new deeper bunkers, and like +4, +5 putting. So it's really been a lot more about approach play than it has been about putting. And I think that that is only going to increase this year with the changes. Now, I would approach this with like somewhat caution. Okay. I'm not saying that the stadium course is going to turn into this like ball striking challenging test. Like I don't think this tournament, I've been nailing the winning score predictions, and I post that in the Wednesday article because that's just a market that we've had this giant edge over for years. I mean, minus 20.5 this week. Like, what are we doing, guys? We went way under on that. I mean, we cover the weather pretty extensively here, almost maybe to a fault where I get made fun of sometimes, but I think with those winning score markets and in terms of how the golf course plays, really freaking matters. It's a major part of the equation, especially in terms of like, forget the wave edges. Everyone understands that you have to look at weather for the wave edges. In terms of that winning score market, I think it's a really big deal, and there's a really big edge there if you can learn to understand what the overall not just how one wave is going to compare to the other, but what the winning score is going to be based on this weather compared to previous years. I think is a skill we are a strong point of mine, a skill I'm continuing to try and hone. And remember with TPC River Highlands, and they're doing that this year with TPC Craig Ranch as well, where, it is at this point on the PGA Tour's mind that scoring is beginning to get out of control. Like, yeah, again, we've been talking about this for 5 years. Welcome to the party. I'm at least glad that they're starting to have these conversations. They had this conversation about TPC River Highlands. Clearly, they had this conversation about the stadium course. They had this conversation about TPC Craig Ranch, another golf course that shouldn't be changed. It should just be blown up. And I'm not sold that what they're actually doing is going to work. I'm not sold that it's the right way to attack this problem. Obviously, the ideal way to attack this problem would be through technology, right? And rolling the ball back and shrinking the size of the driver head, right? So anything that they're doing right now, including changing the par on certain holes, and I am pro like making the pars correct. Like I'm not even necessarily one of those pars, just a number, get over it, guys. Like if you have a par 5 that is playing 4 strokes over par, like that is misparring a hole. Like that is a par 4 hole. Like you should shoot for, what are we even doing if the pars are not attempting to be within half a stroke or a stroke of what the par is? Then you're just completely losing any semblance of the plot in terms of why we're parring any of these holes in the first place. Well, then if par doesn't matter, then why not just make things a par 7? Like that's not an excuse for par 5s to play super easy when everybody is going for the green and 2 from 175 yards. No, that's just misparring a hole. But, they did this to TPC River Highlands and it did nothing on scoring. It did nothing on scoring. They changed the par of a hole on TPC Craig Ranch and it did nothing on scoring. Now, I think with the stadium course, I think just because of the new greens, like we saw with Colonial, which, like we said, had an impact on scoring, it will make a difference. Like I'm saying, if the stadium course over the last 5 years played to an average of -2 strokes under par, and last year it played to an average of even easier -2.8 strokes under par, I at least think that we can get back to 2 strokes under par. Okay. I don't think we're going to get almost 3 strokes under par, which would be the territory that now it depends on the weather and the wind. Palm Springs looks beautiful right now. There's generally very little wind that time of year. So again, if we're talking about a situation where the stadium course plays conservatively 2 strokes under par and the other golf courses are playing 2.5 at least, 2.86 strokes under par, then don't screw around with the stadium golf course for showdown purposes. And again, I think the other thing that I would say about this golf course before I take a quick break and go through my model and an early lean or two, it is very banal architecture. It is very straightforward. It is very Pete Dye visual intimidation. It's very similar to a lot of TPC water heavy golf courses. And I think if there's one thing that I would emphasize that the Rabbit Hole does an excellent job of this week in terms of, and I broke all this down in my article that you can find up on the website. My model, as well as Steve's model, is live right now on the Rabbit Hole. There will be an even further golf course breakdown from Steve and Capper on the Inside Sports Network channel tonight. But if there's one thing that I can highlight here is that this is another golf course that players have realized over the years. This used to be like a strategic, challenging, tight, difficult TPC Sawgrass-esque. Like this used to be how players used to think of TPC Sawgrass in the 1980s. Like this was a hard golf course with trouble at every turn where guys were taking less than driver off the tee. And there were all these bunkers in the driving zone. That is not what this golf course is anymore at all. Like this is a point and shoot driving range, target golf, minimal variables. One of the things I looked at the rabbit hole was desert golf courses, right? Because, you're getting the ball is traveling a lot farther in the warmth. Like you want to be looking at golf courses like TPC Scottsdale, TPC Summerlin. Another golf course that you want to look at here is TPC Twin Cities, because this is what, and the rabbit hole, another thing that it does great is it has like this water danger filter. So you can actually look at the players that have performed the best on these water heavy golf courses. And I think that's the interesting thing about the stadium course, is that it might have the largest delta on the entire PGA Tour in terms of a golf course that would give like a scratch player a nightmare and is very, very easy for the pro. Because if you can carry the ball 300 yards on this golf course and you have relative control over your golf ball, then it's a walk in the park. The greens are super easy. Yeah, they'll play a little bit firmer this year, but pros are still going to have a bunch of wedges. The only long irons that you have on this golf course are holes that you're approaching in two. And again, one of the things I looked at this week that I think is really important is like going for the green birdie or better percentage. Like I was talking to a tour player last week and I said this at Sony, and I will Vic lap the shit out of him gaining strokes off the tee, although he did miss the cut on the number. Hit driver. Like until they do something about your ability to hit driver on these golf courses, hit driver. And he previously, took more of an iron approach strategy off the tee at the Sony Open. He gained strokes off the tee. And I would say the exact same thing about the American Express, and players are starting to learn to do that. I mean, that's why the driver usage you could see on the rabbit hole has gone up. Hit driver. Okay. And play aggressively and take advantage of the par fives. You need to be making 4 birdies on the par fives. All 3 of these golf courses have 4 par fives, and those par fives are amongst the easiest on the entire PGA Tour. Okay. Some of them are a real joke, a walk in the park. Some of them are completely misparred. So the name of the game here that I would say is the other big takeaway I would say is don't be afraid to play an elite iron player this year over an elite putter. Like, I guess we'll talk about Justin Thomas, and I still don't think I'm going to bet Justin Thomas this week. I still don't think I'm totally there on the putting. I still think that I need to see a little bit more consistency out of the putting for him to win a golf tournament. I think it's be another week where I may play him in DFS. He finished 3rd at this event last year. I think he is like a great option where this guy is just going to continue to he's good. I mean, he didn't play well at the Century. I think he's going to play better this week. It's a great golf course for JT to stack a top 10, because in this field now, outside of Xander Schauffele, JT is like quickly developing and returning to one of the best iron players in this entire field. And I think, and this was not the case at Kapalua, where I said I'd rather have you be an elite putter than I would have you be an elite iron player. At Century, I think the biggest way to take advantage now of these firm greens where it's going to be harder to access some of these pin positions, you could drive it all over the place, right? But still putting inside 15 feet and approach play, overall approach play. And the proximity buckets are really evenly distributed this week. Like, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a higher emphasis on wedge play and long iron play because of the par fives over the middle irons. But like at the end of the day, the key thing I'm hammering home this week is like recent approach play, new firm greens, recent approach play with secondary putting from 5 to 15 feet. So I break down all of that a lot more extensively and further in the model, but let's take a quick break. All right, we are back. So I threw all this together in a model, and it was pretty chalky, to be honest with you, probably because I'm a lot heavier on approach this week than I am on putting, which is not something I had expected for this golf course. and was not necessarily the case at Kapalua. So if you look at my model this week, Xander number 1, Sungjae number 2, Sam Burns number 3, our guy Eric Cole number 4. Gosh, you know, I played a lot of Eric Cole in DFS. I do not have him as an outright. I will be not pleased with myself if this is the week that Eric Cole, especially at a good number 2, he's like, you get him 100-1. If this is the week Eric Cole actually wins, oof. Number 5, Tom Kim, who I like a lot next week. Number 6, Patrick Cantlay, who I always like a lot on this golf course. Number 7, Tom Hoagie, another DK play we've been riding that my numbers seem to love, and I will continue to ride on a golf course that heavily accentuates overall approach play. Number 8, Tony Finau. Number 9, Ben Griffin. Number 11, Doug Gim. Number 12, Brian Harmon. Number 11, Brian Harmon. 12, Justin Thomas. 13, JT Poston. 14, Matty Schmidt. Shout out Kyle. I think Matty Schmidt is a great sleeper this week. Kuchar, Putnam, Keith Mitchell, Davis Thompson, Jason Day, and Matt McNeely was in here as well. So let me scroll down and find who would actually be our new number 20 with Mavic McNeely gone. JJ Spawn, who's having quite the solid week this week for himself at the Sony Open. So I will say this in terms of where my thoughts immediately went was I said to myself, okay, I'm a little bit higher on approach play than I am putting. And so I immediately thought of Justin Thomas and Xander Schauffele and even Finau and Hoagie. Because Xander is still the best player in the field. And I'm not going to bet Xander at 7-1, but I will say this. If there's any bit of buyback on Xander after disappointing so many at the Century Tournament of Champions, like if there's any form of discount on Xander whatsoever in terms of ownership, like if he is, I don't know, 28% this week instead of 40% at the Century, I think this is a great bounce back opportunity for him. He's finished 3rd the last 2 years here. He is still the best iron player in this entire field. And if we're going to get a little bit of a lower greens and regulation percentage, a little bit more emphasis on elite approach play, that plays right into Xander's hands. Similar situation with Justin Thomas, right? JT's irons are really starting to come alive, right? I think being in on Justin Thomas in 2025 has become a fairly recycled take at this point. It seems like everybody's like, oh yeah, JT's going to have a big 2025 at this point. But it really comes down to certain golf courses with JT. Like, I don't think that JT is at the stage of his career anymore where the current version of him is as well-rounded of a player as Xander. Where Xander at this point, you know, just like Scotty, is really course proof. And it's just a matter of what are the golf courses that he starts on second or third base, as opposed to what are the golf courses that he starts on first base. And I think this is a good golf course for JT, not a great one. I think it's a better golf course for JT than some might think. And there actually is an easier roadmap to him winning this event without having to make a million putts. But I still think at the end of the day, I don't know if I envision the first tournament that JT wins being at what still could be 25, 26, 27 under par. So that kind of brings me to Sungjae and Sam Burns. And I think there are a couple similarities with each of these two players in terms of neither of them actually are the most elite approach players. And I'll start with Burns. Burns is a good wedge player, a good iron player, not a great one. It comes in waves. And he lost strokes on approach at the Century. Like, he did not hit his irons quite well at the Century. But if you're willing to say, okay, if Burns can just tread water on approach, if Burns can get to 2 or 3 strokes on approach, although typically you want to get to 5 or 6, everything else comes up green for Burns. Like, phenomenal on overseeded Bermuda. He loves these kind of carpety, overseeded Bermuda greens. Uh, Amazing bunker player. Like, Burns is one of the 10 best long-term bunker players in this field. Phenomenal from 5 to 15 feet. He's 5th in this field on desert golf courses, 12th on TPC golf courses, 7th on water heavy golf courses, top 30 in birdies or better percentage in easy scoring conditions, 4th in strokes gained total on this golf course, finished 6th last year. He's played very well at the 3M Open and the Phoenix Open. Everything is coming up green for Sam Burns. The only thing that would be my hesitation would be if I'm really hyper focused on recent approach play this year, Burns is not hitting his irons at an elite level, is the fact that everything else appears to be perfect for him enough to make up for what I said was going to be the most important skill at this golf course. And Sung J M, on the other hand, I would say that I trust his irons a little bit more than Sam Burns this week. And maybe that would be the reason why I favor Sung J over Sam Burns, because I think both of them are going to be in the 16 to 25 range on the odds board. I have no idea. I thought Sung Jae's odds were shockingly low at the Century. Like, Sung Jae was 20-1 at the Century and people were still betting it. And, to their credit, you didn't really get yourself in a hedging opportunity, but Sung Jae finished 3rd. Like, it wasn't a bad bet. And I have no reason to believe that he is going to be any higher this week, because this is still a worse field than the Century. And he finished 3rd at the Century as a 20-1 golfer. So wouldn't that mean this week that Sung Jae is like 14 to 16-1? Am I going to bet Sung J M, who hasn't won in now 2 years, at 14 to 16-1, even if this is the perfect golf course for him? And you think about the last golf course that Sung J M won at, it was TPC Summerlin, which is another easy wedge fest, very easy off the tee, driving range, point and shoot golf course, where you had to get to 25 under par. Is TPC Summerlin, one of the strongest comp courses this week with a ton of crossover on those leaderboards. But Sung Jae, 2nd on desert golf courses, 3rd on TPC golf courses, 6th on water heavy golf courses, 6th in birdie or better percentage, 2nd in easy scoring conditions, just shot 28 under par at Kapalua. Like, that's probably going to get it done this week. Okay. And a better approach player than Sam Burns, at least recently. He at least gained 0.2 on approach at the Century, but still, he's neutral on approach at the Century. He's not hitting his irons at an elite level this week. I do really like about Sung Jae, he's 1st in going for the green birdie or better percentage. So one thing that's interesting about Sung Jae is he plays very aggressively and he makes a lot of birdies. And that's why these golf courses are very good for him. Sung Jae has never finished outside of the top 25 in this event in 6 years. Like, at the worst, it feels like you can pencil Sung J M in for a top 25 here. Although that's what I thought you could do with Corey Connors at a place like the Sony. And just with these guys like Corey Connors and Sung Jae, these like 2nd to 3rd tier guys, they're not elite players for a reason. And you should probably avoid betting non-first tier players at under 20-1, even if they are in a weaker field. It just hasn't always come up roses for me, given that strategy. And it has been a long time since Sung Jae crossed the finish line. But I think it is about as strong of a course fit as you can get for Sung Jae M in terms of the golf courses that he's played well at in the past, the golf courses that he should succeed at. But who knows what that betting number is? I probably will do something similar to what I did with Henley and Connors. I won't bet both of them. I will let the number dictate which direction I go. And I think one will open. My prediction is Sung Jae, but I think one will open at really gross odds and the other will open at okay odds. And just like what happened with Henley this week, everyone is going to bet the guy that opens with better odds. And one of them is going to probably be there and one of them is probably going to flame out. And your guess is as good as mine, who's who. And then I have no idea what the reaction to Cantlay is going to be. I think Tom Kim kind of faltered over the weekend. That's another look for me. There are a lot of guys that are playing in the Sony that I have some tentative interest in that I need to dive back in once the Sony is completed. You know, your Tom Hoagies, your Doug Gims. I think those are guys at bigger numbers that can win this golf tournament purely on the strength of their approach play. So that will do it for me. Enjoy an amazing sports day. We got a great day of football coming up. I am on the Bills in the second part of a teaser leg. I am on the Bucks -3. Do I have a play for the 4:30 p.m. game? NFL. Did I bet something for the Packers Eagles? Yeah, I'm on Packers +5. So Packers +5 for me today, but that's kind of more of a hedge, to be honest with you. Like, I think the Eagles could really kick their ass. I just thought that number was a little bit too high, and I have a ton of Eagles futures, so I kind of threw down a little bit on the Packers +5 as a bit of a hedge. I bet I have the Bills in a teaser leg with what's left of the Texans and Bucks -3. So again, InsideSportsNetwork.com. This is a great week to join. We will have a ton of awesome stuff behind the paywall for you as always. And far more important than Inside Sports Network, if you have the opportunity to donate to Red Cross or Los Angeles Fire Department, I have put in all of the worthy causes, and there are many of them. It can be difficult and intimidating to sift through. So I try and went to find the best, the most worthy ones, although there are many and anything helps. And put those in the description. So my heart continues to be with Los Angeles and the Palisades. And again, thank you to all who have reached out and been supportive to me during this time. It means a lot. And we will bounce back stronger. That is one thing that I can surely guarantee. I have no idea what's going to happen with the real estate market. That is its whole own fascinating discussion over the next 10 years in terms of these insurance companies already wanted absolutely nothing to do with this part of the country. So now it kind of just turns into your own risk tolerance analysis about whether you want to live in an incredibly beautiful place that is very susceptible to natural disasters, because you know this has been happening and this will continue to happen. This is far from the first fire. It's by far the worst. I mean, this is one of the largest natural disasters in U.S. history, but it's not going to be the last fire that LA has to go through or experience. So again, enjoy the football this week. I hope this podcast helped. If you are watching this on YouTube and you want to support Inside Sports Network, but you don't necessarily want to join the community, subscribing and liking this video, if it helped you at all in your breakdown, really means a lot. We blew through 500 YouTube subscribers in our first week, which I'm pretty proud of. And we're going to get to 1,000. We're going to get to 1,000 in the next couple of days. I can feel it. So again, enjoy the sports this week, and we will see you back on this podcast feed next time. Cheers.